Hello and welcome to the EGW Semantic Search. So the purpose of this search is to eliminate the handicaps associated with regular keyword searching. So normally you would search for keyword phrases, and if those keywords or phrases match with specific results, then you would get relevant results. The problem is, if you don't remember the exact term that Ellen White used, or you're wanting relevant passages that might have varying words, then it just doesn't work. So we created this tool to address that issue. So let me give you a couple examples of some queries you can make and what makes a good one on the semantic search and what makes not so good. So if I want to understand, does Christ feel my suffering? If I was doing a keyword search, I might search something like this, right? And the results, some of them might be relevant, but the search has no way of knowing whether you want to know about Christ feeling pain, like suffering pain when he was here on earth, or does he feel our pain? So a much better question would be, does Christ feel my pain? And the tool does a much better job of understanding that and producing results like this. For instance, the second result, not a sigh is breathed, not a pain felt, not a grief pierces the soul, but the throb vibrates to the heart, to the Father's heart. And then the Redeemer, it says, not an emotion thrills at the heart, not a sorrow shades it, not a sin stains it, not a thought or purpose passes through it, which he is not acquainted. And so these are really good results that connect to the sympathy of Christ with his people, with his followers, with us in our pain. So it's very related. Now before I move on, we also added the feature of creating a quote image. So what you do is you click on quote image next to result. You can select a text and then create quote. And what's going to happen is you're going to get options here. You can choose the color scheme you want. And then you can either download the image, you can copy the image, or you can share to Facebook. If you're on mobile, it's going to share directly to Facebook. If you're on desktop, there's no way to do that. So it's going to download the image and take you to Facebook, and you can import it yourself. Now, sometimes you will open this and the quote will be cut off and you'll want context. So you can go to context for more depth and you can create a quote image from the context. So anywhere in here, say you wanted to do the whole thing, you can create a quote image. Or you can go up to a different part of the passage. You can create a quote image. So many options. That's a very exciting feature. All right, so this is an example of a search. Now, a good thing to do is to vary your queries. So you can search for that, find the results, and then you can say, well, how is Christ acquainted with our grief? And this is going to connect to passages like Isaiah 53, because Christ was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And so it's going to connect to passages like that, and it's going to give us a deeper depth based on Scripture. So it's going to draw from that imagery. And you'll notice these are completely different results. There might be some overlap, but they're completely different results in many cases. And so it's great to vary your questions, try a couple different options. Now, a couple other ones. So if we wanted to search, is meat the best article for our diet? We could search that. Is meat the best article for our diet? Or do I want to understand the spiritual connection? So is flesh food harmful to our spiritual life? And so this is going to bring up some results that are more general, but it's also going to bring up more spiritual. So the first result, And the one thing that's important to understand is a lot of times the context, if you look at the context, you're going to find that there's the spiritual connection. It's not always in the quote. The quote tends to highlight the most relevant across the search itself. But the second result here, his people. So God's warning his people that it is for their spiritual and physical good to abstain from flesh eating. And meat, the animal nature is strengthened and spiritual nature weakened. So and there's a lot of these passages where we can see that the consumption of meat detracts from our spiritual condition. So it is not beneficial to our spiritual condition. We can see that. But that's related to that. We could do other searches more related to what does it do in our body? And you're going to find different results for that. Now, if we go back to the homepage, we're going to see some example results. So if we look at what is a symbolic meaning of blue, purple, and scarlet sanctuary, it does a fairly good job of pulling these out. So it pulls up this passage, the linen girdle embroidered with blue, purple, and red. So it understands the connection between that and the sanctuary. There's once in a while you'll notice it misses things, or you may be getting results that aren't quite right. Just fine-tune your question so it's very specific to what you're looking for. So if you find results you really like, you can click share these results. The link to the results will be copied. If you want to share the exact quote, which will share what you see here in the result, you can click share. It'll automatically copy it with reference to your clipboard, and you can just paste it in Facebook or an email, wherever you're wanting to see it. You can click read on egwhitewritings.org. It will take you to the exact place on egwhitewritings.org for this result. You can click similar, and similar is going to come up with the full passages that are similar to that specific passage. So if you're doing deep study, if you're preparing for a sermon or Sabbath school, similar is very useful for that. There is no highlighting on similar, and the reason for that is just that it's very CPU intensive, and so it would limit the ability for hundreds of people to use the tool at the same time. Now, there are some filters you can look at. You can change whether you want manuscripts, periodicals, books. All is generally the best thing to do. You can also choose from a couple different authors. We do pull from other pioneers, and we're working on adding more functionality for this. But if you want to see A.T. Jones on maybe Righteousness by Faith, you can do that. Or you can just stick to Ellen White or all authors. Currently, all authors does focus heavily on Ellen White because it's an Ellen White search. And the rest of these, pretty much you should leave as is in most cases. So a few more examples of queries and how to format your question. It is generally best not to search for something like Sabbath. If you wanted to do that, it would be best to do that on the E.G. White Writings app, because it's specifically designed as a keyword search, and it's going to pull all the results. So you can go through the 500 results if you want and look at each one. So that's better for keyword searching. If you search for Sabbath, it's going to bring up a bunch of different results. It's better to ask questions and be specific in the context of what you're looking for. So, for instance, how should we prepare for the Sabbath on Friday? And this is going to be more specific. So she talks about here preparing our food and how we should do our cooking. She gives the example of how the Israelites were told to prepare for the Sabbath. On Friday, let the preparation for the Sabbath be completed. She talks about preparing a neat and trim. We're to be neat and trim without adornment. So we're not to be worldly, but at the same time, we're supposed to dress nicely. So she gives some examples. We should prepare for that before the Sabbath. And so what's interesting is in the context of preparing for the Sabbath, preparation to keep the Sabbath, we have the counsel to confess your faults one to another and pray for one another. So before the Sabbath, we're supposed to ensure there's nothing no grievance between us and a brother. Make sure our work is not dragging into the Sabbath. So this is going to give us specific results related to preparing for the Sabbath. And so this is just a way to understand how the search works. Now I want to give one more example here, because this is a very good context example where it shows how the tool is pulling results that you will never find, well, you won't easily find with keywords. So you could search for the shaking and you're going to find some good results, but you could also search for what causes some to be shaken out of the faith. Now, sometimes when Ellen White doesn't use specific phrases, it's going to find relevant passages that are related, but they may not use those specific phrases. So you have to look at the results, and you'll notice that they are related. For instance, I saw that I was shown the people of God and saw them mightily shaken. I saw some with strong faith and agonizing cries, pleading with God. And so that's talking about what is necessary for a faith that isn't shaken. It's a spirit of self-denial, it's sacrifice, and it's pleading with God. So these are things that are not maybe immediately connected, but as we read, we can notice this is connected to having a strong faith. We see that giving heed to seducing spirits is connected to being shaken out. Through those who depart from the faith, the power of the enemy will be exercised to lead others astray. So you have to be careful not to be led astray by those, not by placing faith in others, but only faith in Christ. She says souls are imperiled. There will be a great sin in the sight of God, as was the sin of Uzzah when he put forth his hand to steer the ark. And so another principle here we see is that when we try to make things happen ourselves in our own strength, and we try to force things when we think it relies upon us to ensure the work goes forward, things like that, we find that produces a lack of faith, which will cause us to be shaken out. Because once our faith is in ourselves, it will be shaken. And then this is a good one too. God will never remove from any man all causes for doubt. And so if our faith must rely on sight, if we need all doubts removed, then we will be shaken out, because our faith needs to be a faith that is not by sight, but it's an evidence of things that we can't see yet, not until heaven. So this is an example, a really good example of results that may not have as many key, quickly discerned connections. But as we read, we notice that it's very relevant passages. Just, she didn't use the exact words we're looking for. Okay, I want to give you a couple examples of bad searches. So, for instance, if you're looking into the feasts, a bad search would be, did Ellen White keep the feasts and should we? And the reason why that's a bad search is because it's combining two questions that the tool cannot effectively give an answer to. This is where an AI would probably do a better job, theoretically, because it could understand, parse, and try to pull things together, but it also would make things up. A better question would be to search something like, are the ceremonial feasts still binding? Should we still keep the ceremonial feasts? Things like that. So it would be better not to combine questions. So ask a question, be specific, and then you can follow it up with a different question. A couple other examples, using modern words that really are hard to connect to Ellen White's language or the language of her time. Things like, was Ellen White opposed to GMO? Or is it wrong to use processed food? Or things like that, that these are words that have no connection to language of that day. So those would be questions that, again, an AI would theoretically do a better job of, but again, it's going to conjecture, and we don't want conjecture. So the purpose of this tool is to eliminate conjecture, eliminate that problem with AI, and focus on just using context to find the answers. So please use the tool. Please share it with your friends. Use the quotes. Create the quotes and share them. It's a great resource to share things that you are blessed by in the Spirit of Prophecy. Thank you for watching.